Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the MX Endurance Podcast, where we look at everything that's been happening in the world of endurance sports. My name is Tim Ford, and I'm joined by the penultimate legend, the sexy shepherdess, the sexiest voice in triathlon himself, James Bale. Jimbo, welcome back to the podcast. Sorry about last week.
Yeah, we missed a week, didn't we? Just randomly missed
I
a
missed
week,
the
and
week.
I
I missed the week. Don't blame it on you. Blame it on me.
I got a few messages on social media asking where we were. You were probably tweeted in on those as well, but I covered for you, mate. I said I didn't say that you dropped the ball. I said you were very busy, and we've had to skip a week, but we are back. And you are. How are you now? Are you firing all cylinders now?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's been a hard week where I think on the Sunday, which was the final day of the camp, firstly, camp was incredible. They're always very, very great to go to. But by the Sunday, I literally couldn't speak. Like I lost my voice and I had to MC you can still hear it a little bit, I think, but I had to like MC I guess, graduation ceremony, whatever you want to call it. And it's a group of 30. Like it's not like a room of hundreds. I had to use the microphone because I could barely speak. So it's like, welcome everybody to the farewell. It was hideous. So yeah, got through it. Always a bit of, I think I averaged like 3 hours sleep a night or something. And you go there, it's like this time I'm going to continue my tri training. And it's like day two, getting up at 6 a.m. trying to swim laps, just going, this fucking sucks. I've had 2 hours sleep. Nope. But I did bits and pieces. But yeah, good to be back, mate. Good to be back and getting back into a bit of a routine. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I'm over on the continent at the moment, as you know, and doing a fair amount of running as things stand, which is good. Clocked 60K last week, which was the most I've run in a week for a while, and my body seems to be holding up, mate. I'm not getting that. I'm not getting that sort of knee calf pain that has dogged me for so long. So onwards, mate, onwards.
I'd love to
Things
hear
will
it.
keep improving at this point.
Love to hear it. Again, a little injury update because I know people love it. I'm back up to running half marathons, which is good. So I think the it's time to start doing a bit of intensity now, which I'm excited about. I think I've sort of worked out my year. Actually, I have to get a bit of a personal shout. My brother did his first marathon on the weekend. So proud, big
Ah,
brother, proud big brother moment for Luke.
how
Didn't
did you
go
get on?
not well. He had an absolute shocker. He blew to pieces at 26K and limped home in, I think, 4:48. But as I said
Okay.
to him, like, it's very easy to DNF when things are hard. So to finish, I think it shows a lot of guts, but he's got the bug now. He's like, that sucked. I got to do another one. So
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna do one with him. I think we're looking at maybe doing the Melbourne Marathon in October. And I said to him, yeah, mate, if you do it, I'll come and do it with you. So maybe a marathon's in
Pace him
my.
to a sub 4.
I'm not pacing him, man. I'm gonna go for, I don't know. I'd like to go like sub
Oh,
two
okay. So
fifty,
when you say do it with him, you mean say cheerio at the start line and see him at the end?
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I thought you were going to do the big brotherly pacer thing.
I've only done one marathon actually. I've only run one marathon in 2012. So I think I'm probably due for a new. I'd like to go under 3 hours. I did 3:36, I think, and I think the longest I trained up to when I was preparing for that marathon, I ran about 20 kilometers. I thought I should be right. I'll work it out on the day. Didn't work it out on the day. But yeah, I'd like to prepare properly for one, and then yeah, I think yeah, things are looking good though. Excited to get stuck in and actually start planning some races and things like that. So yeah, all good.
There's some work to do, Mr. Ford, your end. We were discussing it before the podcast. You have work to do.
Always,
So
mate.
get going.
That's why I love the sport, though, right? If it was easy and I like a challenge, I like to do new things. So yeah, back to the grind. It's the good stuff. Only problem is weather shit, which you'll appreciate. But mate, nobody cares about that because this podcast is the official podcast of MX Endurance, the world's premier endurance sports community, created by Chris McCormack. I am going to be sitting down with one Joe Skipper at some point during this episode. Time of recording now. I'm recording with Joe tomorrow morning. Uh, God knows what we'll talk about, but we'll cut that in at some point. But mate, I thought a good place to start is on the topic of Joe Skipper because Joe is in Texas at the moment because this weekend we have the Americas Championship. Notice that they've combined the North and South American championships into the Americas Championship with IronMan Texas is happening. One of the iconic races on the Ironman schedule down there. We know that this was where we saw Magnus and was it Ben Hoffman have that epic finish last year. It's a race that we've seen lots of crazy things. I think this is also, is this, no, that was Brazil. Is that Brazil? Was it here where we saw the? And anyway, it's an iconic race. So I don't know how much you know about the race or the start list, but we'll start with the men because the men's field is a bit deeper than the women's field. But names that I've noticed on the start list include Joe Skipper, Matt Hansen, Rudy von Berg, Chris Lefferman, Cody Beals, and Bart Arnotts. What are your thoughts around this race?
Well, it's Joe's opening race of the season, isn't it?
Yep.
So he's going to be he's going to be looking to come out of the traps firing. Obviously, they've just had a new baby, so congratulations to Joe on that. They haven't actually been on a podcast since that happened, so I haven't had the opportunity to say well done. But congratulations to him and Amy. It's
Laura.
start of Laura. Did I get the name wrong?
Of
Oh,
his wife, yeah, Laura.
yeah. Can
Yeah.
we edit that out, please?
No, absolutely not.
Congratulations to Joe and Laura.
Who's Amy?
I don't know. I don't know. I've no.
I appreciate the commitment. You took a stab. You were so confident. You were so confident that it actually was like, is his wife's name Amy? I was like, shit, Joe. You caught me off guard. So well done. But you're delivering with confidence, mate, which speaks volumes.
I like Joe's commitment to fatherhood, the way that he's just had a new baby, and then the first thing he's done is got on a plane to Texas to compete in an Ironmans. But obviously they'd have planned that route out because I think they knew the date the baby was coming. So exciting times for him and start of a very long journey there for both of them. I'm interested. What do you think his form? Where do you think his form is at the moment? Has he got any indicators? Has he given you any clues? Because I know you spoke to him at length the other day.
I speak to Joe at length all the time, to be honest. But I think that Joe wouldn't be going to this race if he didn't think he was in race winning form. That's the sort of guy that Joe is. I mean, yeah, Joe's probably said this. I think he's been quite vocal. I don't know, but the reason he's going, because this race wasn't on his schedule when we sat down at the start of the year and sort of discussed what Joe would be doing this year. Texas wasn't on the agenda, but because training was going so well, he's decided to go and have a crack and see where he's at. I like that for Joe. I think that Joe is definitely an athlete that races better the more he races, within reason. But the fact that he's chomping to go so early in the year, I think is a really, really positive sign after the year that he had last year. And hopefully, because again, if we remember 12 months ago, it was around this time, maybe a couple of weeks earlier, where he went to South Africa to race. And that's where everything sort of unraveled, where he got COVID and then, called into sub at the last minute. And that sort of threw out his year a lot. I'm very curious to see, because we know that Joe's progression this year is Texas now, then in a few weeks, ITU long distance worlds. And again, I like when I think of Joe as an athlete, I always think that sort of, Ironman, what are we talking, 4 or 5 weeks before another big race suits him really well. And I think that this could be a really good combination to make Joe very dangerous, not only in Texas, but then going to Ibiza next month. We could see Joe win his first world title. So I like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's like you say, it was around last year when he got called up he got the COVID issue, and then he got called up to sub 7, sub 8 that things it was a struggle from then on for him, wasn't it?
Mm.
Do you think that a victory early on in the season will spur him on to bigger and better things as the year goes on?
Yeah, definitely. Again, he's a confident. They all are, aren't they? Athletes are all confidence creatures. But to be honest, I don't think not trying to be disrespectful here, Joe, but he ain't. It's not a walk in the dark. There's some pretty big names on that start list. I mean, Matt Hansen can run. I mean, we all love the joke.
Man can run.
Why does Matt Hansen swim so shit? Because he saves his arms for the run. I still think it's one of the best I've heard. I mean, Chris Lefferman was 4th in St. George last year, so we also know that he was in really good form. May last year, which is a similar time, and then we sort of didn't see much from Chris at the end of last year compared to that start. So I mean, I'm not sure if it's had injuries or what, but again, always a name. I think he's probably America's most underrated male athlete, and he's somebody you have to be aware of. And then there's Cody Beals, the Canadian, who's always sort of Mr. Consistent, just up there or thereabouts. But the one
really
that I
working on his social media presence at the moment. Lots of funny videos coming out of Cody Beals. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Then the other one is the one that I think we have always got this sort of question mark over, just because he's so new to the distance, is Rudy von Berg. So we saw him have that win in Nice last year where he made his debut on what is in effect a home ground. But then he wasn't great in Kona, and we sort of seem to have a weird, because again, to me, Rudy von Berg, he's podiumed at a world champs again in Nice. He's a very, very good athlete. And again, almost like I was talking about Paula Finlay a few weeks ago, I'm just not sure what we're seeing with Rudy von Berg. We know that he made the coaching change last year. He switched to Mikkel Eden when it seemed like every second person was going to Mikkel. But yeah, I'm curious to see where Rudy's at. It's interesting that we're seeing him doing an Ironman. I guess he's preparing for Nice because, again, being a home ground Ironman for him, he's going to want to do well there. So I'm curious to see where he's at. But there's plenty of talent in that men's field, mate.
Yeah, there certainly is. I mean, Joe is ranked 15 at the moment, isn't he, on the PTO rankings?
Yep.
Are any of the others ranked higher than him? I can't remember off the top of my head. Who's the highest ranked male athlete going into that race?
Off the top of
Have
my
I
head,
asked
I'm
you a
not sure.
question you don't know the answer to?
Yeah, I would guess. It's interesting because I was looking at it just before. Uh, maybe Matt Hansen. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't. To be honest, I don't know. I think I'm just going to come and say I'm not sure. Because I am a try geek. I'm not that big a try geek. I know the top three. But yeah, no, I'm not sure.
Let me pull it up quick. So say something interesting while I get
Well,
this.
again, I think if you look at this start list, a lot of these other guys, Matt Hansen, Rudy Von Berg, Chris Leffman, Cody Beals, maybe Cody Beals not so much, but Arnott's. But Arnott's another guy we can't discredit. They tend to dabble more at both distances, whereas again, to me, Joe is a pure Ironman distance athlete. So I feel like that's often neglected. Like the advantage that gives Joe over a lot of the other guys is often, neglected a little bit. I mean, to me, looking at this, I think Joe's the standout favorite. I'd put Matt Hansen a close second because Matt relies so much on that killer run that he's got, but Joe can run as well. The interesting one that's worth
Yeah.
pointing out, and I haven't.
Joe is the top ranked athlete going into that race.
Okay, that's cool. Because the other one that I saw that I didn't mention before, but is that Andrew Horsfall Toner is on the start list, who we know is, I think, statistically the best swimmer in the sport at the moment. So that there's going to be a pack up the road from athletes like Joe and Matt Hansen when they get out of the water. So it's going to be interesting to see how that sort of race develops because again in Wales, where when Andrew Horsfall Turner had that gap, Joe had the 20-minute puncture, but yeah, I guess I'm just curious to see how the race unfolds. Are we going to see Joe just try to go to the front? Are we going to try to see him put a gap on Matt Hansen? Are we going to see Rudy Von Berg try to take the challenge to Joe? I think that it's going to come down to those three, depending on which Rudy we see. Because again, I think Rudy is a very, very good athlete and an athlete I'd love to see do well. But I mean, we're sort of inconsistent with our podium picks. But I would probably put Joe, Matt, and Rudy. Maybe Chris Leffman. Those four would be my top. Three of those four would be for me the podium, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I definitely want to see Matt Hansen do well.
Always.
Obviously, I think for the sake of keeping you on side, I want to see Joe win. And also Joe.
He listens, mate. So
yeah, he's one of my favorite athletes. So yeah, go on. I'd like to see Joe win. I'd like to see certainly him start his season off well. And having just had a new baby as well, it's a hell of a celebration to go out there and take the first win of the year. And I think he probably will. I think he won't have that much of a deficit out the swim, and his powerhouse on the bike, and then bring it through on the run. I don't know what's the climate going to be like in Texas. Do you know?
I don't know. I would assume at this time,
No.
we're coming to spring. It's probably not super hot.
It's not going to be super hot, is it? Because that's the only thing that could derail an athlete like Joe. Because I know he struggles a little bit in the heat.
Mm.
But no, I think we'll probably see a Joe skip a victory here.
I think so too. Onto the women's race, and again, going through the start list, I went through the full start list. There's only really three names that sort of stood out to me, to be honest. And again, I could sit here and try to make up stuff about athletes I don't really know, but the three names that I saw that were of note to me were Lauren Brandon, Jocelyn McCauley, and Kat Matthews. And to me, probably Kat Matthews is, head and shoulders above them as probably the favorite. I mean, Jocelyn McCauley, I know is an incredible runner. I just feel like Kat is such a strong bike. I mean, she's not even that bad a swimmer. Such a strong bike runner that I just see Kat sort of doing this thing solo, to be honest. But who knows? I mean, Lauren Brandon's an excellent swimmer. Anything extra to add, do you think, to the swim, or it's pretty?
No, I mean, I think unfortunately on this one, because the depth isn't quite there on the start list, we're probably going to see Kat Matthews dominate. She's made this comeback from her accident and her recovery, and she seems to be firing very, very well. And it's good to see that after the bike accident she had. So unless something strange happens, I would be very surprised if we didn't see Kat Matthews win this race.
And it's not even because I don't think she's a specialist at Ironman. Like we've seen her have incredible results at middle distance, but I always think that her strength is that Ironman distance race. Like I think that she's very, very good at this longer stuff. I mean, again, she's just so consistent. You look at that sub-8 race she did last year, Kat did last year, and it really looks like, she sort of ran past Nicola, and she says it, her pace was the same the whole race. She's just consistent. She hits that pace it holds it, and that's a real skill because I don't, you look at a lot of the splits for athletes, and they always do tend to drop off a fair bit, and Kat's very, very consistent. So I think I mean, it's interesting. Her crash was in Texas, and I know there's been a lot of sort of focus around that. So to come back to Texas to do her Ironman return, it'll be fascinating. And again, excited to see it. I'd love to see two Brits go to America and win the regional, the America's Championship. I think it'd be typical triathlon, to be honest.
Yeah, man. And yeah, a sign of the British domination that is to come.
It's not the only race that's happening this weekend. This one sort of snuck under the radar a little bit, and it does every year. This is a race that certainly punches above its weight when it comes to getting an all-star field, and that is Challenge Gran Canaria. Now, we know this race because this was the race a few years ago where we saw Jan Frodeno race against Patrick Lang, and there was other people in the field. But it's become somewhat of an iconic race. And looking at the start list this year, it's sort of continuing now. It's definitely not as deep, but the names that are there are very impressive. So in the men's race, we've got second place in Kona last year, Sam Laidlow, who's making his season opener. We've got two-time winner, Kona winner Patrick Lang, who we saw run that incredible 2-hour 30 marathon in Israel at the end of last year. We got Aaron Royal, who did really well at the PTO event. I think he podiumed in Edmonton, and is a former short course athlete. Has been at the Olympics for Australia. Sort of stepping up to that middle distance. Very, very good swimmer. Pretty much, great all-round athlete. And the other one of note for me was Florian Angert. Top 8. I think he's ranked 8th in the PTO at the moment, but again, very, very good athlete that you always sort of see up there or thereabouts. How do you see this one going? What are your thoughts around the Gran Canaria men's race?
It's an interesting one. You say the race flew under the radar, and it did, but I mean, for me, Patrick Lang is the master of flying under the radar. He just he just pops up every now and again and has an outstanding performance, or sometimes he can just have a sort of mediocre performance, but he's always a threat and he's always there. I'm very interested to see how his year shakes out, because I think he's at a junction in his career where he could come back and get some seriously good results and be the Patrick Lang of old, or he could kind of just peter out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's got that sort of those two options ahead of it. And I want to see him back firing on all cylinders and putting in those stinging run legs that we used to see. So I mean, there's some interesting players in this field. Aaron Royal is certainly one to look at, but I think Patrick Lang is probably the name I'll be focused on for this race.
Yeah, you're. I mean, it's again, you look at Patrick Lang, and I feel like he does. You say fly under the radar, but he almost doesn't get we're all, and I mean, I'm guilty of this too, where you sort of, we discredit him a lot of the time because it's like, he won the titles when Frodo wasn't there. There's always a sort of like an asterisk next to Patrick that I don't think is fair, to be honest, because he's a fucking incredible athlete. The thing I'm curious about with this race in particular is when you look at the actual, those 5 names that I read, Patrick is not the swim biker that somebody like Sam Laidlow is. Sam Laidlow is an incredible swim biker, and I don't care what anybody says, he's a shit runner. Like, yeah, okay, he did that incredible race in Kona. I'll say it. He had a pretty, it doesn't hurt when you've had a draft from most of the bike leg when the motorbikes are ahead of you. So we saw him, have, basically ran out of skin. Everybody expected him to blow, and he didn't. So, kudos. But I wonder, because Aaron Royal will probably be able to swim there with Sam or close and ride with Sam or thereabouts. So you're going to have this group that I assume will be up the road from Patrick. And then it's just a case of how big's that gap. Because Patrick can run. But again, as we saw in, Roth last year, I mean, it was 15 minutes. He was never going to run 15 minutes into anybody. But it's all going to come down to how big that gap is, because he did run that 2:30 last year, and we know how good a runner he is. This is a tough course, don't forget. This is a very, very, very hilly technical bike course, which is going to take the legs out of, especially athletes who maybe are a little bit weaker on the bike. I'm curious to see the dynamic.
He has that kind of, you can tell whether he's going to run that distance down almost as soon as he starts. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes he fires and sometimes he doesn't. And when he fires, it's like the Terminator. There's no stopping him. But when that run leg starts, it's normally fairly easy and fairly quick to tell whether he's on one of those days or not. Like you say, at Roth, the distance was almost insurmountable. The commentators tried to make a fair game of it, but it was never going to happen.
I mean, this apart from the Patrick Lang factor, we are about to see Sam Laidlow make his first race after his incredible second place in Kona last year. What do you expect to see from Sam Laidlow this year? Like, is the hype real? Like, how is he going to adjust? Because I mean, for an athlete like Sam, I look at him and I think he probably loves the hype, but I also feel like he's got nowhere to hide anymore. He's not won a race. He's the king of seconds and thirds and things like that. But there's he's talked a big game, and it's time to see. And again, I think Sam Laidlow is incredible. I hope he does, but I'm very curious to see basically what happens this year if he is able to convert those good performances into great performances, or if we are going to see, I guess, much of the same we've seen him in the past. What do you see happening for Sam Laidlow this year?
I mean, look, it's interesting. He's a hell of a swimmer, and like you say, he did get. There was a. I mean, yes, he got a bit of a draft, but he still had to turn the pedals on that bike
A bit,
in Kona.
a bit,
Um,
just a bit.
but yeah, I mean, you say yes, he hasn't won a race, but he came second in Kona. Look, Kona's a hot pressure cooker of a race,
Yeah,
you know, and I think that hanging on for the second place, for the second step on the podium in those conditions in that heat is worth more than hanging on for a second place anywhere else,
I agree, definitely.
because it shows a real a mindset and an ability to cope with those conditions,
Mhm.
both physically and mentally. So I think we have to give a bit more to that than if he hadn't won a race and had come second anywhere else. So I think there will be more to come from Sam, and I'm excited to see it happen. I mean, I interviewed him last year for the podcast, didn't I? And you weren't in that interview. And I think had you been, and had you had that conversation with him, you'd probably be more where I am, because I got a lot of there wasn't it wasn't fluff and bluster. It was kind of confidence, but earned and thoughtful confidence. And I think we're going to see big things from him, mate. I've got a lot of faith in this man.
I love it. Again, I'd love to
Mm.
see it because I love the way he goes about what he does. Like I think we need more Sam Laidlows in the sport. I just again it does make me nervous a little bit when you see somebody coming out because like again I know that I'm not trying to reference the Collins Cup, but the athlete in that same sort of level of bravado I guess is Sam Long, and we've seen the when the pendulum swings the other way how that can become quite brutal, I suppose. Like we haven't had a lot of nice things to not we haven't had a lot of positive things to talk about Sam's performances of late, and yeah, again, I find it so curious where he's so young. He's had such a big, literally debut on Kona second place. That's it's incredible. Again, he beat Christian Bloomfield. He was there, one of the fastest times to ever do the race ever. How's that changed him? Does it feed that, you talked about how confident he was. Does that make him even more confident? I'm so fascinated to see that. I think it's why I'm so interested to see how he starts the year because yeah, I love that stuff. So we'll see.
Mm. I agreed. I mean, like it could be a one-off. That Kona second place could be a one-off, and he could just peter out into the triathlon future of careers that never were. But no, I've got I'm quietly confident on this. And watch now, he's just going to explode, and we're never going to hear from him again.
I mean, second place has made a lot of careers for people, mate. To
Yeah.
do that as young as literally on debut to come second, which is the highest a lot of people will ever achieve on that island or have achieved on that island. I mean, the list of people who never won the race who could have is quite long. Again, he's got a pretty good starting point. There's only one way to go, which is to first. So yeah, super curious. And then I mean, Florian Anget, he got that bullshit penalty. It was a penalty in Kona last year.
Yeah.
Good athlete. Like Florian is again, very good swimmer, very good biker, very, very well-rounded athlete. Very strong on the bike, I think. So again, with the course, curious. Women's race, however, is again a bit of a wet blanket, to be honest, because it's Anne Haug and then Ruth Astle, and that's sort of it to me. And again, I love Ruth, but I think that Anne, the run form we saw her demonstrate in Lanzarote a few weeks ago, Ruth, if she has any weakness at all, it is probably. I mean, it's her swim. In fact, no, she's an excellent biker. She's not a bad runner, but Anne Haug is like fucking next level good runner. So I sort of think this is Anne's show, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Ruth is brilliant. She's tremendous athlete and personality. Um, Her only chance in this, I think, is to really put some gap between her and Anne on the bike and come out of T2 with an insurmountable
That's a good point.
run lead.
Yeah,
Which it's not beyond her to do that because she is a hell of a bike rider. So I think it'll be closer than we think.
yeah.
But I'd like to see Ruth win, but it wouldn't surprise me if Anne took this one.
It's funny. I should have thought of this myself because I was just talking about the course. Like this course, it's a very hilly course, and if
Mm.
Ruth can try to put Anne to the sword a little bit, we might not see Anne have those great run legs off the bike, which could be interesting because
Exactly.
Ruth
And
is so
Ruth has
strong.
got the bike skills to do that. She's got the bike handling and bike power on a course like that to really make Annie Howe suffer. So I don't think it'll be a cut and dry thing. And I would like to see Ruth take it, and I'd like to see Ruth sort of execute in that way. Really give her a mauling on the bike and hold on for the win. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't. I think I know that I know that this race was broadcast. I mean, sorry, I do want to give a shout to Charlie Quinn, young Australian athlete, one of the guys I work with, who's heading over there as well. Uh, Good on you, Charlie. I like to see they're out there racing the best, mate. So it's a pretty good place to start. But I know that this race a few years ago was broadcast, and it was again one of those abysmal triathlon efforts where it's like a few set cameras, and you'd be sitting there waiting for Frodo to run by, and he's gone, and then you sit there and say, and he's gone. So I'm not sure on the status of it. It might be broadcast, it might not. I'm assuming that the Ironman race is broadcast because they normally do broadcast their regional championships, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I guess if you're listening, just Google it.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're getting into that part of the year where they do start to broadcast the races now. Challenge have got to up their game a little bit. I mean, all of them have got to up their game a little bit. We'll be talking about that a bit later anyway. You'll be running that through that with Joe and me in a bit.
Certainly will. The other piece of news that came out last week, which was again the main reason I was disappointed we didn't get to record, was that the PTO have announced their wildcards and full start list now for the Ibiza PTO European Tour, the first race we're seeing this year, which is I think like 3 or 4 weeks away at this point. What are we? Yeah, probably 3 weeks away, 3, 4 weeks away.
Yeah.
And we have, mate, we have some firepower in that start field. And interestingly, I actually think the women's field is better than the men's field. But what do you think?
It's stacked as fuck, isn't it? So should we talk about the women's field first?
100% we should, because I think that women, like, again, I went to the men's field and there's the obvious headliners, and then it sort of was like, okay. Whereas the women's field, I thought I'd finish writing all the names out of note, and then I went, fuck, there's even more. Like, holy shit, this is a very, very good women's field. So I'm definitely I mean, both races I'm excited to see, but the women's, it's
Yeah,
good.
man. So we've got Ashley Gentle, Lucy Charles Barkley, Paula Finley, Daniela Reef, Annie Howe, Chelsea Sidaro, Laura Phillip, Holly Lawrence, Emma Pallant Brown, Lisa Norden, Fenella Langridge, Kat Matthews, Tamara Jewett, Jocelyn McCauley, Sarah Perez Sala, Ellie Salthouse, Grace Theck, India Lee. And it just goes on. I mean, it doesn't seem to the quality doesn't seem to peter out as you read the names out. I think Ashley Gentle going in as world number one, showing herself to be very proficient over this distance, is in my mind the favorite to take it. But none of those names I just read out, if any of them took this victory, I wouldn't be surprised. There are people in there that have got a skill set to take the race to Ashley Gentle, and because she's been on form in the races she's done so far, doesn't mean that form is going to be a constant continuing factor.
Well, again, I think you're right. Ash Gentle is the obvious choice. We've seen it. I think she was undefeated last year at this distance. I'll say it 100 million times. I don't care. I still think she would have won 70.3 worlds if she was there last year. Like, she's just so good at that distance. I'm kind of, again, and it's funny, we talk about momentum and, maybe we have a short memory, but, I found out it's actually Tamara, not Tamara. It's Tamara Jewett.
Ah,
That run she did in Oceanside, mate, where she ran past, Chelsea and Kat and all these others. It's got my attention. Like, it's really got my attention. And I know that when they've raced, Ash has beaten her before, but we are months later. I'm so curious to see. I have this vision where those two are going to have a battle, and we're going to see those two literally duking it out for the run. Because I think I am starting to accept that this isn't like, and I know it, but this isn't 70.3, right? This is a different distance. So a different
yeah.
athlete, it suits a different sort of athlete. That's why Ash is so good at it, I think. Not that she's not good at middle distance, but some of those names on the list that you're talking about, like Lucy, I'm curious because I know that Lucy's very, very good at 70.3 and Ironman. haven't really seen her excel or really even do too many of these distance races. Chelsea, we did really, really well in Edmonton. Kat, I think she's actually doing I'm not sure. She might be doing the double, I think, because I know she's on both start lists. Paula Finlay, again, if she's firing, absolutely incredible.
I want to
Uh,
see Ellie Stothouse have a good day. I want to see Ellie, come back to where she was, where her and Holly were sort of duking it out, and I'd really like to see Ellie do well.
it's interesting because Holly isn't like, if I look at Holly and we talk about the tiers, and I really feel like Ellie and Holly, who I've always thought were, absolute killers, to me have sort of dropped down a tier, if that makes sense. Like Holly,
Mm.
I think I expect so much of them, and they've both. I mean, Ellie, I think she didn't have the best year last year. In fact, by her standards, she was well off, to be honest. I'm curious because again, it's an athlete that you want to see do, or both of them. Like, there's so many names on the list that I think are capable of it. I just feel like there's some that are much more capable, or if statistically more likely to have that success. And I think again, Ash Channels is an obvious choice, but yeah, I'm curious to see what Tamara Jewett does. I really feel like we're on the precipice.
So is
I mean,
she,
it could be the one and done. We could see a Jackson Laundry from last year where that was her big performance, and we sort of don't see a feature. But I think she sort of owed the benefit of the doubt a little bit just based off that performance because it was.
is she your pick for the win?
I think she might be, to be honest. I am purely
Ooh.
talking about the form. I know that's a huge call, right? Because I'm a huge Ash Channel fan. You want the challenger, right? Ash is the reigning champ. You want to see the challenger come and try to take it to her. And I think that confidence after that performance, as I said, beating Chelsea, again, one of the best runners doing the sport at the moment. I think that fuels her. And it's not just her run, her swim and bike was so impressive there too. It'll be interesting to see. I think that women's race to me is yeah, very, very fascinating. But there's so many, again, there's so much talent on that style list. And I've really also, as much as we talk about the race, and we will talk about this in a bit, I'm curious to see how this race is broadcast, right? Because every time we've seen these races like Edmonton last year, where we saw these incredible start lists, it lacked. You only ended up seeing the front of the race really, and you didn't see the battles. Where this is a race where I think we're going to see the athletes come through. We're going to see the Tamaras and we're going to see the Ashes run through the field a bit. Whereas if it's just showing the front of the race, we might miss that. So I'm very curious, as much as I am about the race. I've said curious a lot this episode to see what the PTO has done off the back of last year, because we know they heard the feedback. We know they've heard it. What are they doing differently this year? Again, like where's the evolution? Where are we going? They've got Warner Brothers Discovery involved now. We know they're going to have to up the game in terms of broadcast. Is this going to be better, or is this going to be much of what we saw last year?
I hope it's better
So do
because
I.
they talked a big game for a long time and they didn't really deliver that on a broadcast. From the broadcast perspective, they've reduced the payouts to the athletes. It worries me that we're sort of petering out, but then we've got the news that came out recently, which we're going to talk about in a bit, that shows they are still laser focused on delivering a package that is lifting the sport up, making it a broadcastable, consumable sporting um, experience for the audience that want to watch it. So yeah, I hope so. But my pick for this race is Ashley Gentle.
Yeah, I think it's
Ashley Gentle's gonna win it.
yeah. Again, I feel like Ash, if anything we've seen is she's very good or she's not good. Like there's again, there's not degrees of separation with Ash Channel. It's all or nothing to me. Like, what was it? The PTO chip, not the PTO, the Challenge Championship last year, where she just, what did she? No, who she get off the bike with? Did she get off the bike with Emma Pallant Brown? And Emma ran through and Ash didn't, or something? Does that ring a bell? Does that sound familiar?
I can't remember.
Me neither. I'm disappointed in myself. But again, Ash is the obvious choice, right? I just feel like
Mm.
I don't just want to get on that thing of just picking Ash every time. So
Fair enough. Well, we'll see how that transpires. On the men's side, we've got Christian Blumenfeld, Magnus Ditlev, Sam Laidlow, Max Newman, Leon Chevalier, Florian Angert, Frederick Funk, Aaron Royal, Patrick Lang, Daniel Beckergaard, Ben Canute, Jason West, Bradley Weiss, Peter Hemerick, Tom Bishop. I'm picking out names now that interest me. Carl Smith, Ben Hoffman, David McNamee, Alistair Brownlee, Jan Frodeno, Cam Worth, and Justus Neutschlag. The last four were the wildcards that were recently added. So we've got the PTO assigned athletes, the people that have signed up, and then we've got the wildcards at the end there. It's gonna be intriguing for me. This race is intriguing because we've got the last four gold medalists in triathlon racing each other. Finally.
Finally.
But but I'm wary. I'm wary because this sport burns, mate. It burns like a motherfucker. And I am. Oh, what do you think it is? 50-50 that all those four gold medalists, all those. Do you think
Yeah.
50-50 that they all line up? Because we're not. We're too far away from the race. 1 minute you're gonna have Jan Frodeno is going to be stuck somewhere in a hailstorm and not be able to get there. Alistair Brownlee's going to be injured. And Christian Blumenfeld is going to win it because he's the only one that actually is like impervious to injury or illness.
You see, it's funny you say that because I wouldn't be surprised if Christian's the one that we don't see here. Okay. And I'll put it to you this way, right? We haven't seen Christian do any of the races this year that Gustav has done. He also he's laser focused on that Olympic berth for next year. Okay. Now, and I know we saw the article that said he wants to retain his number one ranking. So he's clearly motivated by it. But I do wonder if in the back of your head, if you're all about Paris next year and there's even a niggle, if you go, actually, it's not worth it. So to me, I actually think the one, again, I'm not putting this out there. Please, I hope I'm not putting this out there, but I don't think it's as clear cut as if any, I've had question marks over Christian this year just because we haven't really seen him anywhere. And I know you listen, mate, and I'm not trying to wish this upon you, but I mean, I fucking want this race to happen so badly. I have been wanting this race to happen so badly for years, and I'm almost refusing to allow myself to believe that it's actually here and it's actually going to happen because, like you said, I'm so reluctant to get my hopes up. But this is everything I've dreamed for so long, mate. Like it's perfect. Maybe the distance. Maybe I wish it was a slightly different distance. I'm not sure, but
yeah, same. I wish it was a 70.3 or an Ironman, but no, this is good. This is good. Did you see Jan Frodeno's response on social media?
Which one? The
Where,
video where he's on the phone?
yeah, he said
Goosebumps.
the way we're both going, we need to get there first, which
Yeah.
is the fear that we have. And then yes, look, we have to talk about this from a perspective of non-pessimists, don't we? Because we're here to talk about the sport we love and what couldn't happen. So we've got to go into it. Let's assuming they're all three of them racing.
Yep.
And for me, if all three of them are racing and none of them are injured, they're all on form, then those are the three we need to be talking about, and those are the three we need to be watching.
I disagree.
You disagree.
I disagree,
right,
mate.
Give me another name then.
Jason West.
Yeah.
Jason West, mate. He is my, we make the big calls at the start of the season. And I think I said it 2 weeks ago. I think he could clean sweep the PTO races this year. I feel like he is built for this distance, mate. He's built for it. I cannot emphasize how impressive that run was at Clash Miami, right? It was so fucking good. He nearly ran down Leo Berger in Oceanside. If he had another 500 meters, he would have caught him. I am curious about the impact of having the Yarns and the Alistairs and their swim power and stuff at the front of the race. But if he is in the hunt, mate, I think he outruns all of them. I really think he does. So he's the one where, again, you're right. The main event is those three. It's definitely, in fact, if it wasn't for Jason West, I would 100% agree with you. And again, I don't know. It is just that intrigue where if he does, I feel like we could see Jason West really shocked. Again, not me. I'll be sitting here going, told you also. But I just feel like he's one we should watch at this race.
Oh, absolutely. There are names out there we should watch as opposed to the top three, the headliners. And Jason West, certainly that run was outstanding, and he could have a real impact here. But the dream for me is the three gold medalists coming out of T2 together and shoulder to shoulder for the race. It would be astounding.
Oh, those three with Jason West running them down. So then you've got the dynamic.
Yeah.
That would be really cool, wouldn't it? Actually, that would be
the way things are. I mean, Christian's had an interesting year, really. He hasn't, like you say, we haven't really seen or heard from him a huge amount. Brownlee, Christ knows.
Yeah, exactly. Roll the dice. Which one are we going to get?
But for me, I think Frodeno's going to take it, mate.
So do I. I do. I genuinely do. And again, it's because I've admitted it. I will say it 1,000 times. I am a fanboy. I know it. Again, it's There's so,
Yeah.
I mean, we also need to give more again. While the fact that it is very much about the Christian versus Jan thing, it's also the Jan Alistair thing, right? Like we've seen these guys have not traditionally gone along that well. They have been they've been racing each other since before Christian was even a triathlete, right? Like,
Yeah.
Christian talks about taking up the sport in 2008 or whatever. They were racing each other at the Olympics. Alistair Brownlee was leading the 2008 Olympics. And what was he, 19, 17 years, like some ridiculous age, and disappointed that he didn't win the thing. Jan goes on to win the thing. Alistair then goes and wins the next. Like those two racing each other is something we haven't seen enough of in recent years. And again, you think, yeah, so
Absolutely. From a drama standpoint and stories to tell within the sport, there is the sport's got a short memory, and that as well as anyone. And their rivalry goes back such a long way and reaches back into the depths of the early days of triathlon as an Olympic sport, and then as they both graduate up to long course, Alistair a bit later than in Jan. So yeah, and they don't get on particularly well, do they? They're not like the best of buds. So there's certainly going to be some interesting dynamic on that start line.
yeah, no, yeah, it's going to be good. And just because again, like we think, yeah, I think
Do we write Christian off too easily though?
yeah, of course we do.
Are we?
Again, we
Yeah.
definitely do. Christian Bloomfield, at this stage, I'm almost trying to be contrary a little bit, just because I'm so sick to fucking death of always against Christian Bloomfield. Like,
Yeah.
I'm grasping at straws here, right? Like, I'm not just. This isn't a foregone conclusion at all. It is that Christian can literally any race at any distance, anywhere. In fact, if he took up fucking Xterra next week, I wouldn't be surprised if he won the thing. Like, it's such a like I said, I'm grasping at straws and being romantic. I think about this. If Christian wins this thing, I absolutely would not be surprised. But I am so I think I'm impressed about it is we've got them all together. And again, that we've seen Jan. I didn't think we'd see Jan race his guys at a 70.3. He's gone even shorter. So it's
Hey, Fredino's going to take it. Fredino's going to take it. I got images of the Collins Cup.
that pain face fucking running.
Fredino's going to take it. Fuck it. Fuck everybody.
Christian
Fuck you
pulls
all.
ahead, cramps.
Yeah.
Jan. Oh man, just imagine it. It'd be so good. And again, don't, like, and you got to look at how the actual, like we can't just look at 1, 2, 3. You got to look at how the race might break down, because you're going to see Sam Laidlow, Jan Frodeno, Alistair Brownlee, those guys, they're going to push the swim. I don't think Christian could be there or thereabouts, but I expect there to be a bit of a gap. They can all ride like the fucking clappers, okay? So Christian is either going to have to close up or maintain. I don't know. Are they going to commit? And then Christian is a faster runner, but we're not talking like 10 minutes faster, right? We're talking a few minutes. So, and it's a short run. So it's going to be.
Yeah. What race was it last year where Christian didn't make the front bike pack and then just disappeared backwards? I think he might have had a puncture or something.
Dubai.
Yeah. That's the kind of scenario I can see playing out. That's the way I can see it playing out. I could see those faster swimmers setting off on the bike, and I could see Christian missing that group, not being able to get back on, and kind of disappearing back down the field and being out of reach coming out of T2.
And you know why that is because we're going to have two of the most intelligent racers on the planet doing it. We're going to have Jan Frodeno and Alistair Brownlee, and I'm going to assume they're going to have a chat to each other going, oi, let's not fucking let him get near us, right? We can both ride like the clappers. Let's commit. Let's get out of that. Let's fucking push the swim. Let's go hard. And like, let's remind these guys how to swim a fucking triathlon, right? Let's commit to the swim, get off the bike and put the hammer down. That's how you'd have to do it, right? You don't want to give Christian, because again, if they get off the bike with Christian, it's going to take something special from them, which I do think they're capable of, but I would almost say, okay, it's not looking good here. So again, I think that we're talking about two of the greatest, well, in my opinion, the greatest to ever do the sport, the greatest short course athlete to ever do the sport, being chased by the future heir apparent of the greatest to ever do the sport. Yeah, it's God, you can hear I'm getting excited. Race. You can hear I'm getting excited about it the more I talk about it. So I think we should move on to this next part though, maybe, because I will chuck Joe in after we've had a bit of a chat. But the news came out was it last week? I think it was last week, right? I thought Triathlon Magazine Canada broke the news about an email that had been sent around by the PTO to the members, to the athletes, of which it sort of, I guess, what do we call it? Solidified its position moving forward. Now, I sent you a screenshot. I think it was the first you heard of it. And do you want to go through the screen or just those main dot points? We can have a chat around that.
Yeah, I've got it in front of me here. So the screenshot you sent me was the PTO's talking points for where they're going to move going forward. And it said the sport needs a season-long narrative with a clear start, a clear narrative throughout the season, and celebrated champions crowned at its conclusion. The sport needs consistency with the same regular faces and names competing head-to-head throughout the year. You cannot build a fan base. Every time the start gun goes off, different people are on the start line. The sport must focus on its very top athletes because those are the faces and names that will get the attention of the media and in turn help the sport to grow. It's simply impossible for a niche sport like triathlon to grow through promoting too many athletes at once. The sport must engage with broadcast and mainstream media to reach a wider sporting audience. The existing triathlon audience is very valuable, but we have bigger ambitions. Last but not least, the sport needs to harness the unique advantage that triathlon has over most venue-based sports to showcase its host city environment. This is where the Tour de France has been very successful in that as much as a showcase for France as it is a pro bike race. Now, you sent me this without any context in a message, and I was just like, oh, Tim, that's cute. Tim's taken all the things that we've said and written them out into a little thing and made bullet points, and good work, Tim. But no, it's pretty much everything that we've been saying, isn't it? Almost word for word for the last few months, really, about how if the sport wants to challenge some of the existing sport properties that exist out there, where you've got a fan base that is truly dialed in and engaged, then you need to have consistency. And it goes back to how excited we are about this race with the 3 gold medalists going, because we're saying finally, since 2018, we're going to see a race happen that we want to see happen. Now, for us who are fans of the sport and operate in this ecosystem, 2018, waiting the years from 2018 to now, we're just like, oh, that's annoying, but we've done it. For anyone else who's trying to be a fan of a sport, yeah, fuck that. I'm not waiting 5 years for my next really good fight.
Yeah.
So I agree. I agree with all these points. Just do it.
Just do it. Again, I read this and I just had this. I was just like, that is that meme of Jack Nicholson doing the like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that was me reading that. I was like, fucking, how good is this to? I mean, again, I don't think it's perfect, but it's fantastic to see what I think is positive steps. And again, one of the things I found really interesting was, do you remember we had Sam Renouf on the podcast last year, the year before, and one of the things he was talking about is, we've actually analyzed the audience, and we can make enough off the existing triathlon audience. Like it's good enough, right? There's plenty. And they're like, no, we have bigger ambitions. And I'm like, fuck yeah. That's what I like to hear, right? I don't want to hear going, oh, actually you can get by just using, utilizing who. Fuck that. Come on, let's go. Let's go big. This is what I want to see. This is what we've all been begging for. And if they can pull it off.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a series of talking points that are the nice. This is what we want. This is where we want to be. What this isn't. This is the difference between a risk assessment and a method statement, isn't it? This is your risk assessment. These are your problems. What we haven't seen from them is the method statement part of it, which is this is how we're going to solve these issues and this is how we're going to move forward. So that's my next question. Is right. This. You've got it written down. You've acknowledged this is where you need to be. How are you going to get there? Because that is the journey to getting there, is the interesting and I think very critical part. But also, I mean, there's an element that you're going to speak to with Joe, where the PTO are the organization for the long course athletes, and they're building their race series around a race that is shorter than a 70.3. So is that truly reflective of long course athletes or looking after long course athletes? That is another conversation. I think I'll leave that conversation to you and Joe, because that he'll have a perspective on that I don't and can't have. But from an audience perspective, which is where I sit, I love this set of objectives. I'm very interested to see what they're going to do to get to this outcome.
It's funny because, again, I talk with Joe all the time, and there's certain things I'll send, because normally I send Joe a message and after a bit we're both sick, we just call. But I can tell sometimes I'm going to send Joe something and it's almost like, how quickly will he try to call me? So I sent him that same screenshot to you, and I reckon it was within 10 seconds my phone rings. I was like, yeah, I knew this was coming. And again, that's the reason for getting you on the show, because I think, again, people, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the one thing that I want to, I guess, bring up with you a little bit to discuss is I'm disappointed we haven't seen them try and do a long distance race. Like that's the one thing about this where I'm like, and I said maybe, and I spent last week with Belinda Granger, the commentator, and I had this conversation with BG, because same thing, we both think this is really positive, but I said, I still feel like we assume that it won't work. I thought sub 7 last year was a really positive step in the direction so that we could broadcast a long distance race well. Whether it means a PTO event, maybe not, but I still think something like going to Roth this year. I'd love to have seen the PTO to go to challenge and go, listen, let us broadcast this for you. You do your thing. Let us broadcast this race and we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, okay, yeah, it's a bit of a backstep, but at least we've tried. And that's the one thing personally that I'm a bit concerned. Again, I'm sure I have a big more.
No, I agree with you. I mean, that's the comment I made a minute ago is, what are they doing to really try and represent the people that are pure long course athletes? But I mean, look, I'm sure, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. Their argument would be, well, let's get this set of objectives clear. Let's get us on a road to that where we've got a sport. Once we've got a sport, we've got a fan base. We've got a well-funded sport that is actually garnering interest of a wider audience. That's when we can say, right, we're going to try and engineer something somewhere where there is a longer course race with some of the best athletes in the world. Because I think the problem you've got with the broadcasting long course racing as it sits at the moment is that you can't guarantee you're going to have the names there that are going to bring the focus and the media attention. If you've built the sport first on this set of objectives where you've got a bunch of athletes who are much more confident in their yearly earnings and much more confident in their standing as professional athletes, then you can start to engineer something where there is an interesting and dynamic long course race once a year that's the PTO broadcastable event, and it's done in such a way that it's looped courses, or it's on a closed environment somewhere where you've got that interesting broadcastable nom.
I want to talk, because you're talking about the engineering it, right? And it makes me, again, I think I discussed this with, I promise I'm not just name dropping, right? But we were discussing this very thing. I was having a chat with Chris around this in a different context last week, because I look to us talking about the arena games. The first arena games this year came up, and I was just like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care about this start list. I don't know who half of them are. Yet I watched it and I was like, fucking, this is compelling racing. And there's this idea, right, that we need to get the best athletes to be the 20, let's say it's 20 athletes who do this PTO thing they've been talking about. We all assume that it's going to be about getting the top 20 ranked athletes. I wonder, though, if that's actually what's best. I wonder if it is a case of getting the Christians and the Gustavs and the Magnuses and the Sams and if it is, or is it about going, we are going to struggle to get buy-in from the top guys who want to do Kona and want to do 70.3 awards and want to do these other things. What if they walked away from the top and found a group of 20 athletes who are a very, very close level and said, you guys are going to be our athletes, and you're going to be the 20, and you're going to do every race, and we're going to give you a salary. And again, if you're a triathlon fan like us, you're probably going to go, why is Cam Worth picked? Why is Cody Beals on this start list? Why haven't they chosen Christian? Because if you're an outsider, you've no fucking idea, right? And then suddenly you've just got this group, and you engineer the series because it's close. Like,
that's I see your point, and it's a good one, but you're not going to get the media buy-in as much from an audience perspective. I don't think you are.
But that's from triathlon media, right? If they're talking about non-triathlon media, I just wonder if because again, I think I saw somebody basically saying Sam Laidlow and that still say Kona's their career goal. They want to win Kona, right? And I'm sure many are. I just wonder if you again, how do we know that the 20 F1 drivers are the best F1 drivers in the world? Objectively, how do we know?
Well, I mean,
because they're racing F1. Because they're racing F1.
Yeah. I mean, but I mean, F1 is an interesting example of that because you've got
But you know what I
people
mean? Whereas
fucking
if the
fund them and
PTO
stuff, don't they?
if the PTO focus on their 20 athletes, right, and the narratives about their 20 athletes, if it's an enclosed environment, right, and it is just the same 20 athletes, yeah, you could probably
Yeah,
start.
I mean, you're right. That's a very good point because from an outside perspective, neither of us follow motorsport at all other than Formula One.
Correct.
So it's not like we're going, there's this driver in Formula 3 something that never got his shot, but he was the best, but he
Or
didn't
the
have the
Indy 5
funding.
car 100 guy or the guy doing
Yeah, yeah.
NASCAR.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. We're just like, oh, the ones in Formula One. Yeah, they must be the best.
Exactly. That's what I mean. And I
Yeah.
wonder if we could
I
see.
see your point.
Yeah, I wonder. That's the one thing where I was thinking because I think they are going to struggle, right, to convince. If they went to Christian Gustav or whatever, and like, guess what, boys, next year you're all in or you're out. They're going to go, fuck you, we're out. Like you need us more than we need you. And I just wonder if we could see a shift and it'll be cheaper for the PTO. It means they can commit more to the broadcast. It means they can actually try to create something sustainable rather than going front loaded. I don't know. It's the one thing. Well, there's many, but I'm very curious to see what sort of approach they take and what buy-in they're going to get from the athletes because the top guys are making enough money. They don't need to commit to a year-long thing, right? Because they're made enough
No.
revenue from other things. So that's why I feel like maybe that's the approach. Anyway, look, we could
Go
go
and
on
have a
about
chat with Joe about it.
I'm gonna have a chat with Joe. I will drop my interview with Joe, and we'll be back afterwards. All right. Well, I'm joined by the second fastest man to ever do an Ironman distance race in history. The winner of Ironman Wales, Ironman Arizona, fifth place in Kona last year. Joe Skipper, how you going, mate?
Yeah, I'm going good, mate. Great to chat to you again. We've just had a little bit of a chat, haven't we, offline before we coming on here, putting the world to rights.
I was going to say we need to be careful about what we say on this call because we're actually recording it and making it public, unlike most of our regular conversations. So we have to be careful, but I'm sure we'll be fine, mate. It's good to connect. You're in Texas at the moment. You're lining up this weekend for IronMan Texas. How you feeling?
Feeling good, mate. Yeah, training's been going really well. Like I wasn't originally planned on doing this race, as you know, but fitness was going well. The numbers were looking good, so I thought I'd put an entry in. And obviously, with our birth of the first girl, for anyone that doesn't know, that was 2 weeks ago, so I wasn't 100% sure, but entered it and was able to get away and I've been able to do the race. So looking forward to it and been feeling really good.
Well, there's a good point to start again. Baby Arabella, 2 weeks old. What's the conversation with Laura like when you're like, so, mother of a newborn baby, I'm going to duck off to America for a week, leave you with the kid. How did that conversation go?
I said I'm thinking of racing Ironman Texas. Like I've put an entry in, and she said, "Well, she's only going to be 2 weeks old then." And I said, "Oh yeah, I know." But I kind of said the season's only 6 months. I said, and I said the powers, like the numbers, what I've been hitting are really good. So I think like I can't really afford to not race because you don't know what might happen. Like for instance, injuries, illnesses, sickness. I missed a lot of last year with COVID and then getting ill again after that. So that wiped me out for St. George and a load of other races. South Africa was where I picked up, so that was a bad one.
Yeah.
And it was only like sub-7 where I started getting back into it. But it wasn't until September where I was actually racing 100% fit again. And it's kind of like you've only got limited years anyway, haven't you, in triathlon? So she kind of knew. But I wasn't 100% sure because I had to make sure everything was all right with her and that she's got some help from some family or something. So her mum's been like helping her out because you can't do it all by yourself, it's too much. So luckily, like her mum's moved in for like the time while I'm gone and she's like helping her out in that way. So that if it hadn't been for that, I don't know if I'd have been able to get away because it's just too much for one person to do by themselves, as a lot of people that are listening probably know.
How you finding being a dad, mate? Is it been a shock to the system or are you loving it? I mean, I'm sure you're loving it.
Yeah, loving it. But like, it's not really been that bad for me, if I'm honest. Like, Laura's been doing the lion's share of the work and like through the nights and stuff like that. She's been looking after Arabella because if she cries and that, she just wants like feeding and stuff. So there's not really much I can do. So I've been staying in like a separate room to make sure I can get the sleep because if I was tired all the time, I just wouldn't be able to train. And you could just lose so much fitness in 2 or 3 weeks that you'd spent like 6 months building. So I couldn't really do that. But then during the day, I have to like sort the stuff out around the house, like, and like make her food and stuff like that, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, all that stuff's like down to me. And then like keeping it tidy and sorting it all out. And then her mum comes over sometimes. Might take Arabella out for a bit and then Laura can get asleep as well during the day and stuff. So it's been kind of like a team thing, but it kind of is a bit daunting at first because you leave the hospital and then they just they just give you the baby, and it's
Good
like,
luck.
right, yeah, basically like good luck, you're on your own now, you know. And it was tough the first few days because she was crying a lot in the evenings and stuff, and we just couldn't get her to, like, you know, calm down at nights, you know. And I woke up a couple of times like during the night, so I'd like go and see Laura and stuff and like be with her for a bit, you know, because it was obviously getting quite emotional because the baby doesn't stop crying, and you're like, what do we do? Do you know what I mean? Like, what can you do? You know, you're trying to give her food and stuff, and that was tough the first few days, but getting into a bit of a routine and a rhythm has been quite good. But the first few days were definitely pretty tough, especially for her.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that things are going well. We were talking. I recorded the rest of the episode with James yesterday, but we were talking about you around this race, and I guess looking back 12 months, because you touched on it, right? You said last year around this time you went to South Africa, you picked up COVID, and it sort of derailed the first half of your season, really. Do you think that, I mean, we saw the form you hit by the end of the year. Is the plan a little bit this year to try to replicate what you did last year, but without that fuckery of the first couple of months being around like COVID? So do you think that this is your chance to try to do what you meant to do last year and hopefully, go on to big things?
Yeah, basically. And I think with Nice being a bit earlier in September, it really does play into my strengths, because if I go into the altitude training a bit fresher, then and a bit fitter, or sorry, a bit fitter, but still like pretty fresh, then I think I could be lining up in Nice really, really fit. Because when I did Ironman Wales last year, I was in fantastic form, and I think I could be better than what I was in Ironman Wales. Um, and I haven't got too many races before Nice, really. Like they're big races. Like every race that I'm doing is a decent standard one, but there's not a load of them. So I don't think it will like make me too tired. And I think if I'm smart with my training, I don't push too hard. You know, like I haven't really pushed too hard in like February, March, and I feel like I'm going well, but I feel like I'm only like 80%. You know, I think there's a lot of room for improving. And like you say, seeing what I managed to do once I got recovered from the illness, I think I can do a similar kind of thing. Hopefully, be a bit fitter starting the altitude training, and then be in Nice in really, really good fitness.
What are your thoughts around that Nice course? We know that it's going to be a really technical bike handler, bike course. Like, does it excite you? I mean, apart from the conditions itself, that it's going to be a lot cooler than Kona. What about the actual technicality of the course?
Yeah, I think definitely, because the course is going to be a really fair course. Like, it's not going to be a course where you can moan at and say the motorbikes affected the race. Like, I don't really think the motorbikes will have much impact on the race. There was a few bits where potentially they could pace people, but even if they do, they're not going to gain that much from it, considering compared to like other courses. I mean, like you get 25Ks, 25Ks into the race, and you have a climb that lasts 50 minutes to an hour. And I think the race is just going to be in pieces up there. You know, drafting isn't going to make any difference, you know, on a climb like that. And that's obviously going to suit people that are good climbers at that point. But then because there's still a lot of climbing later on in the course, I think you're going to have to be very strong. You know, you could be a good climber, but if you're not someone that's really strong after like 4 hours of riding, 3.5 hours of riding, then you could blow up and you could lose minutes in a very short period of time. Obviously, the descents are very technical as well. The last descent is the same one, the 70.3 Worlds, which I didn't race there, but I've rode that descent and it is really technical. You know, if you know the course, you can gain a lot of time. The run course, bit boring, to be honest. Flat 4-lap course. That's a bit disappointing.
Good for the spectators. Good for the spectators,
well,
mate.
it's not even good for the spectators, because I tried spectating it last year when I was there in Nice, and you couldn't tell when people were coming because there's too many people on the course.
Oh,
And it was
okay.
it was incredibly hard. And because there's so many people on different laps, it was impossible to see where people were. Because I was trying to spectate my mates, because that was when our like stag party started, you know,
Yep.
so a lot of my friends were racing, but I just couldn't see when they were coming, and it was so hard to follow, and you'd miss them. So that's a bit of a shame. Like, it would have been good if it was at least even a 2-lap course would have been a lot better. But I think world champs should be 1-lap bikes, 1-lap runs. So you know exactly if someone's in front of that athlete, they're ahead. You know, there's no, oh, he could be on his 2nd lap or he could be on his 3rd lap. That's the biggest disappointment for me. Run course, flat and fast, but I think times might not be too quick on the run compared to what they could be if it wasn't such a hilly bike. Because I think the bike's going to take a lot out of people.
Do you think, because I mean, look, we saw what happened in Kona with you last year. I was out there with you, watching you run down the guys ahead of you. That, you know, your battle with Sebi there at the end was pretty cool, because it is going to be a lapped course, you know, and there by the 4th lap, there's going to potentially be thousands of age groupers on course as well. Like, what's that? Are you worried about that? Like, is navigating the age group is going to become a problem? Do you see them having dedicated areas for the pros? Like, how do you think that's going to become? Could that become an issue?
I don't think it will become an issue, but I just think it takes the shine off it a bit, and it's going to be hard for people to see where some of the pros are. Some of the pros are going to, like, when you want to watch it and you want to see who's in like third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and all that, you might find it hard to see when the pros come past
Yeah.
because there's so many other people you just can't tell. So it takes, for people watching it, spectating, it's not going to be as good. And I think on the coverage, live coverage, it's not going to look as good because you're going to get people running through and they're just going past hundreds of age groupers on the screen. I just don't think that looks that good, to be honest. I mean, you wouldn't get Kipchoge doing the London Marathon on a 4-lap London course, would you? Running past people that are running 6-hour marathons. It's just, it should be a world champs in my eyes, a 1-lap course. That should be a requirement, that you do a 1-lap swim, 1-lap bike, 1-lap run. Plus, you can't get interference then because you're going to be coming up to the aid stations, and some of the aid stations are going to be completely rammed with people.
Yeah.
You're going to struggle. And I just think that's what it should be for the world champs. Like, fair enough for Nice, the normal race, and other pro races, 4-lap courses, 3-lap courses, fine. But world champs should be a one-lap course in my eyes.
No, I think it's something that I hadn't considered. It makes total sense. Speaking of the broadcast, though, one of the main reasons we got you on this week is to talk a little bit about broadcasting, because the news came out last week, or I don't know actually know how it came out. I think Triathlon Magazine Canada shared it first, that the PTO contacted their members, which include yourself, and sort of laid it out what their plans are for the future, which included focusing very heavily on the 100-kilometer distance race as opposed to the longer distance race. They're going to focus on a smaller number of athletes to try to get that season-long narrative happening. And the first thing I did when I saw this come out was I sent you the link, and I think you picked up the phone almost instantly. We had a good 45, 50-minute chat about it. But I thought, I think there's a lot of positives, and I'm sure you do too. But I wanted to get your perspective on this, because and I know we're going to talk about it, but this to me seems like it sort of is a bit of a finger, fuck you to the longer distance athletes like yourself. But again, I just wanted to get your opinion on it, mate, because I mean, I've already had this conversation, but I thought it was a good one that other people might want to listen to. But what was your reaction when you heard the news?
To be honest, I kind of thought that was the way it was going, because there was never really any talk, was there, of like a longer race happening?
There were whispers. There were some whispers. Yeah.
There were some rumors, like, but they were about 2 years ago. There was going to be a 200K race, wasn't
200K, yeah.
Or maybe a year ago, saying there was going to be a 200K this year. But then when I spoke to a couple of the PTO people that were out there in Kona, they said there's no plans for it this year. And so I kind of knew there wasn't going to be one. And it is a shame. Like, I mean, to be honest, I think the distance, what they should be doing is the ITU Worlds, which is what I said to you before, which for people that don't know is a distance that's basically bang in the middle between a 70.3 and an Ironman. And I think it should be the Ironman athletes taking on the 70.3 athletes, and you come together in the middle and you see, you could battle that, Nate title it as, the battle of the long distance, athletes, who is the best, because the distance is right in the middle. It's going to, test everything. And it's a distance that you can race multiple times a year as well. An Ironman, some people can only do 2, maybe 3 if they're lucky. So you want a distance that people can race 4 or 5 times, really.
Yep.
And I think it's a good endurance test, because it's still a 5.5 hour, 6-hour race. It's not like it's a short, basically similar to what a classic is in cycling, isn't it? 5.5, 6 hours. That's, once you start going over 4 hours, that's when the wheels really start falling off people. And I kind of feel like with the 100K races, they say that they want to make it for the TV because it's more entertaining. And it's like, well, if we're going shorter and shorter, why don't we make it, a 40K, an Olympic non-drafting race, like the sprint non-drafting? We can get it over and done within an hour if we want. But what are we doing? Are we making it really short so we can fit it in a short TV spot? Or are we making it a long distance triathlon? And you can't make it really short and say it's long distance triathlon at the same time, because it's not. It's that, so yeah, I think that's a shame. I think the distance, I think it's just a bit boring, isn't it? You don't really get blow ups in a 16 or 18K run. 80Ks on the bike. It's just not long distance triathlon.
People would probably disagree with you if they watched that Edmonton race last year, where we saw Alistair Brownlee again the stitch, and then we saw Sam Laidlow again the stitch, and then we saw Christian Blumenfeld again the stitch. But I feel like the comment you made around the things getting shorter, this isn't just a short course phenomenon we're seeing, because let's wind the clock back. Was it 5 or 6 years? Super League triathlon comes along, and it's almost the exact same situation we're seeing now with short distance racing, where they're going, we need to make this shorter. I think Super League racing's down to about 40 minutes now, it's purely about broadcast. And I wonder if we're constantly making things shorter. At what point is it like it's a 100-meter swim, it's a 3K bike, it's a 1K run? Like if it is, yeah.
My argument is as well is the Tour de France is 21 days. You know, the Giro is 21 days. You know, Paris-Roubaix 6 hours. You know, Liège, Bastogne-Liège 6.5 hour race. Flanders 6 hour race. They're like the biggest races, you know, in the cycling calendar. I mean, people will tune in, day out for a Tour de France stage. But the Tour de France didn't say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, to get people to watch this race, we need to make it 60K crits, you know, around a city centre so people can come out of their houses and watch it. It's like, it is the Tour. You watch it because it's the hardest endurance races in the world, you know, on a bike, 21 days back to back, racing from anything from 3 hours to 6.5, 7 hours a day, you know, and people watch it because, you know, and appreciate the endurance and the brutality of the event. It just wouldn't be the same. It's like you make Paris-Roubaix an 80K stage going over cobbles. It is not the same race. People do not blow up like they do in an 80K race on the bike, like they do in a 250, 260K race. It's like Milan San Remo, nothing happens for the first 250Ks, but we don't say to Milan San Remo, let's just make the race 50K.
Just get rid of that part.
Yeah, nothing happens till we get to the Cipressa anyway. So let's just start at the bottom of the Cipressa and race up that, down that, up the Poggio and finish at the bottom, you know, and then we can show the whole race on TV. It's like nothing really happens, but there is a whittling down process. Some people are on a bad day. Some people don't make it over the little hills before you get to the Cipressa. Some people crash in the tunnel going over the tunnel before they get onto the coast road. Some people get left in bad positions before they get there. And it's the gradual fatigue and the little bits that happen that you don't expect. It's like same with Paris-Roubaix, you know, not much normally happens in the first 3 hours, but some people do find themselves out of position. Crosswinds can happen, and it's the unexpected bits that happen. And it's the gradual fatigue that you get from people having to work harder in the first 3 or 4 hours that makes the race so great in the last 2 hours. And that's what I feel like with long distance triathlon is, you know, for an Ironman, it's the fatigue that accumulates over the period of time, over the first 4 or 5 hours, that can lead to great racing in the last 3 hours. If you had all the top people racing an Ironman, the racing's going to be close. I guarantee you. If you got 40 of the top people racing over, you know, an ITU World Long Distance, it is going to be very close racing. It's going to be extremely competitive, and I think it would make it great. And if they were making it for the TV, what my suggestion is, just show like the last 2.5 hours of the race and have a 30-minute bit where you show what's happened up until then. Because some of the cycling races that I watch, they show the last 2 hours, 2.5 hours of the cycling race. You join it with like 80Ks to go or whatever. And there's no reason why the triathlon can't do that. You show the last 2.5 hours. The first 30 minutes is saying, let's see how the race has gone, or 40 minutes, you know, up until now. And they show some bits from the swim. The commentators know what they're going to say because it's already happened. Show bits on the bike, decisive moves, and then the last 2.5 hours, which would basically be the last 45, 50 minutes of the bike and the whole run, would be shown live. And I think that would be perfect for it, you know. And then it's the same length of duration on the TV as what they currently have.
One of the things I find curious about this is because I like a lot of what they're doing, but in terms of the I guess pure pivot away from the really long distance racing, what I'm I guess not so impressed by is that we haven't even seen them attempt a long distance race. So we constantly hear this narrative, right, that it's not possible, it's not possible. You know, there's no broadcast, people don't want to watch long distance racing, it's too long, it's too boring. So the PTO have come and said, yeah, well, look, we're not going to do that. Our focus is that 100K race. I guess I would have liked to see them at least attempt to broadcast one. And I said this, like, it doesn't even have to be them putting on the race themselves. There's 2 examples that I can think of this year that would have been a perfect opportunity. Number one is in Ibiza, when they're going to be in town for the PTO European Tour. The ITU Long Distance World Champs is happening the next day. I would have loved to have seen the PTO step up and said, let us handle the broadcast here. The second one being, it's funny, both of these races that you're doing, I swear I'm not being biased, is Roth. Because I feel like Roth, outside of the World Champs, he has the best men and women's field we've seen. And I would have loved to have seen them go, let us try to broadcast this race and let's see if we can actually do it. Because fucking hell, it's like I'm obsessed with you, Joe. The other race that I saw last year that I think did a good job of broadcasting long distance race was Sub 7, where you were part of it. So it shows me, or it makes me think that it is in fact possible to do it. I mean, I think that we did a good job at sub, but I would like to then see the PTO at least attempt to do it at maybe a pre-existing race.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I think it's a shame that they haven't tried it, because it would be great to have at least seen them try it and see what the actual results say, you know. And if the numbers are terrible for it, then absolutely, you know, fair enough. You know, the numbers were terrible, you know, keep doing what you're doing. But also what I would say as well is there's a reason why Kona gets so much exposure. And if no one wanted to watch an Ironman, then no one would care what happened in Kona, would they? Like, the only reason Kona gets so much coverage and athletes gain so much from a good result in Kona is because people care and people watch. Like, otherwise, it wouldn't matter if you had a good race in Kona, because the exposure wouldn't be there, the sponsors wouldn't gain from it, and people wouldn't know who does well in Kona. So it shows that the reason why people watch Kona is because the world champs. It's an iconic race. And that's kind of what the PTO needs to develop as well. Like, they need to have these iconic races, you know, like you said, Roth, iconic race, always going to get a big field because it's got the history. Kona, always going to get a big field, got the history. They need to like have these locations if the PTO does want to succeed and make it big, to get the you know, where it develops some history and gets people, you know, almost like in cycling we get the monuments, like I was saying earlier, you know, where you have like San Remo, Paris-Roubaix, Flanders, you know, all the classics. We need to get that in cycling. You need to have, I mean, in triathlon, sorry, we need to get that way. We have these like monuments or classics, you know, in triathlon where, you know, like they used to have probably back in the day, where they used to have Nice as like, that was like almost like an unofficial world championships. You've got Kona, you know, you need these big iconic races that everyone wants to go, and it means a lot to win these races, you know, like that's what we're missing.
I think if you actually look at the landscape of long distance triathlon, I think that those races sort of exist, right? And you want to find the balance of the pretty races and the historic races, because I mean, just off the top of my head, some of those really iconic races, you're right. Challenge Roth is one. Kona is obviously one. I would say probably Texas, but I'd pick St. George over it. And I know that St. George went away and it's come back. IronMan, Ironman New Zealand. Like there are these iconic races around Ironman South Africa. You know, these big races exist. And I think what we could see happen, or what I'd like to see happen, is a bit of a doubling down on it, because I mean, and it kind of happens, right? I mean, it's a lot of the Ironman races now, they're not all pro races. There's the number of actual pro races are much less. But yeah, I feel like the potential is there, right? The ingredients are there. They just need to cook.
There's no reason why they couldn't do it on like the Norseman course, you know, an extreme race like that, and have that as like the top 40 athletes in the world racing. Alpe d'Huez tries another one, you know, which is like a bit shorter, but that's a classic one. I mean, and the coverage is going to look incredible on some of them races. I mean, like people jumping off the back of a boat, you know, when the sun's just come up as a pro race, you know, it's going to be crazy running up the mountain. I mean, you imagine some of the shots that you could capture on that, especially if it's close racing. I mean, running up a massive mountain at the end, there's 6 people in contention, you know. It would be incredible, you know, and they could really make the sport so cool if they did some of these races, you know, with decent prize purses. And all the PTO would literally have to say is, this race is going to be the most PTO points for the end of year season bonus, and we're going to put $650,000 into this race prize pot, and you're going to get all of a sudden a stacked field racing some extreme triathlon, an incredible landscape that is going to look so cool on TV, you know, like
it's one of the questions that, and again, I sort of touched on this a bit with James. I think it happens before or after people have heard this, but we hear a lot around the need to get the best athletes racing each other all the time, right? And I feel like if the PTO is really doubling down on this season-long narrative, this season-long season, that doesn't make sense. We're probably going to struggle to get the biggest names in the sport commit to just doing the PTO races. When you've got races like Ironman World Championships, when you've got races like Challenger out there, I feel like, you know, and I know for athletes like yourself, and I've heard lots of other athletes say this, you know, Kona is the dream, Ironman World Championships is the dream. Do you think it is actually necessary? Let's say it's a field of 20. Do you think to create a long-term broadcast product, is it about getting the 20 best athletes there? Or do you think it is more important to have 20 athletes who are of a level, comparable level, that the racing is close, that we know we're going to do every single event? Do you think that the PTO could pick, maybe they're not the top 20 athletes, but maybe they are I don't want to call them B tier, but a slight tier down, but we know that we're going to statistically have very close racing every time. Do you think that's an approach that could work?
Nah, I think you need the best athletes there, to be honest, to make it really exciting. Because, for instance, IronMan Texas has got 30 or 40 athletes, but it's not got the buzz that Kona has, where the top 20 athletes are there, has it? If you want to make it really exciting, people need to look at the start line and think, oh, fuck, like this race is stacked. Whoever wins that is going to be an absolute beast, and that in your head, when you watch a race like that it's going to take an incredible athletic performance to win that race. And that is what makes it exciting, isn't it? Watching a race where there's people that are good, but they're not the top, you kind of think, oh, well, what would have happened if Gustav was there? What would have happened if Christian was? What would have happened if Jan was there? I wish they were there, whereas it gets you absolutely pumped for it when you know that the top 20 in the world are all racing over this race on the same day, that I think you need the top 20. And I think it's possible. I think it just needs two main things: timings of the races. Like if the timing was a bit better on some of these PTO races, I think it would fit absolutely perfect. And also you need the buy-in from the athletes.
Yeah.
The athletes have to be motivated by the distance and motivated by the kind of course and the location of the race. If the athletes think the race distance is great and they like, the location and timing fits in, they'll definitely be there, especially if I also think as well, the prize money isn't great enough to get the top 20, because if you're a top 20 athlete, you're still thinking, I could finish 15th, 10th, 15th, whatever.
Well, look at ITU, right? The percentages are so close. You could be winning one week and then you could be 20th the next week, because you're talking about 0.01% of a difference between the athletes. Yeah. So that's what's probably going to happen if you get the top 20 together as well.
And the problem is in the PTO races, though, for 15th, 20th place, the prize money is terrible. You don't get any bonuses from your sponsor. So say I got like 10th place and I did every PTO race and I got three ninth places in a PTO race. I ain't going to get any bonuses from my sponsors. And I'm probably only going to get, what, $10,000 for ninth place in a PTO race? Something like that, do you reckon?
I don't know if that's right, but probably sounds about right.
15, probably between $10,000 and $15,000, I reckon. So I'm only going to be getting $45,000 in a year of prize money from that. I'm not going to get any bonuses from my sponsors. It's probably not going to get much exposure. Whereas you could win a normal Ironman race, and with your sponsor bonuses, you're already getting way more.
10th is $5,500.
Well, there you go. So you get 3 10th places in a PTO race, solid. You're going to be a decent athlete to do that, and you're going to walk away with $18,000. You get you win one Ironman, and your bonuses, on top of that, are more than the whole season of doing PTO races. The money needs to be deeper. The money's good if you win it, but if you're 10th or 7th or 8th, it's pretty bad. And I don't think that that's good enough to attract people that are top 20 in the world.
Can I ask, because one of the things we hear a lot around the PTO, and I don't want this to become all about the PTO, but do you feel, because we hear that it's athlete owned, it's an athlete owned organization, part of the ownership is the athletes you collectively own, and therefore when it's successful, you guys will be successful too. Do you feel ownership of the PTO?
I've literally just let the PTO get on with what they do. They're doing 100K races. To me, I'm not really fast. I'm never going to do a 100K race. I've got no interest in doing a 100K race. So I don't feel like I've got athlete owned or anything. And to be honest, I'm not really bothered when they send the emails around too much, because I've got no interest in racing a 100K race. It does not excite me at all. Doesn't motivate me. So, I kind of just let them get on with what they're doing. If I get points to finish high in the rankings, great. I'm probably not going to get a massive amount because they've made it so if you do PTO races, you get more points, which is absolutely fine. Of course, they're going to do that. They want people to race their own races. That makes total sense. That I'm not going to get in the Cons Cup because Europe's so strong. You've literally got to be 4th in the rankings. So unless you're finishing on the podium in PTO races, you're not. So it kind of doesn't really have any bearing with me, because I'm not bothered about getting into the races. I'm not bothered about racing the races. So whatever they get up to, they get up to. I've kind of, I'm just sorting out my own races and concentrating on the races that really motivate me, to be honest.
So one of the conditions, and I mean, I'm sure people watching have seen this, that PTO members have to put the PTO logo on their kit. Is that something that you're going to continue to do? Or do you think that suddenly you're looking at this going, well, what's the point? Or is it just, okay, maybe I'll get a bonus at the end of the year, or even something like that?
Yeah, I'll definitely keep the logo on my kit and stuff like that, and I want to be in the running for an end of year bonus, because to be fair to them, they have really helped me out. And the bonuses that I've managed to get from the PTO have been absolutely fantastic, you know, and if they hadn't have been around, I wouldn't have got them. But in terms of where they're the races and where they're going with the races, they just don't suit me, you know, and I'm not that interested in them. But I say this, if you spoke to someone who's a 70.3 or athlete or an ITU athlete looking at stepping up to non-draft racing, they're going to have a different viewpoint and they're going to be absolutely pumped with what the PTO is doing and they're over the moon. So, you know, it's my opinion's this, but I could easily find you an athlete who's absolutely pumped with what the PTO is doing. They think they're going in the total right direction, you know, like there's always someone who's really pleased with what a company's doing and someone who's not that pleased, you know, and it doesn't suit me. I'm not that bothered about it, but I know other athletes would love the distance that they're doing and think it's absolutely fantastic, you know. So, you know, I don't think what they're doing is necessarily wrong. It's just not good for me, basically.
Mate, I think that's a pretty good spot to leave it for the PTO chat. One last thing before we wrap up, and what's the plan this weekend? What are we going to see? What's the strategy coming? I know that your competitors are listening closely, going to get the secrets. How are you attacking IronMan Texas this weekend?
Decent swim. Obviously, try and get out strong. Sit on the best feet I can possible. Push the bike hard. I want to do a decent bike split. I want to drop the runners. I want to try and go sub 4 on the bike, and then try and run close to 2:35 off the bike, and that should get me around sub 7:30. So it would be nice to do a sub 7:30. It'd be nice to tick off a 4-hour bike course record, bike course record, and try and get close to the run course record. That would be the target.
I reckon you should go after Christian 7:21, to be honest. I think it's the conditions are looking ideal. And
yeah, I mean, if I do a 50-minute swim, because it could be wetsuit, that's definitely on the cards. 4 hours on the bike, that's 4:50. That would mean a 2:32 run. That would be fairly challenging, depending on what the conditions are like. It's not undoable, but to be fair, it's not his time's not really the official Ironman time because it was downstream. So
yeah.
Got around 10 minutes onto that, and I think I could beat 7:32. Like,
I love it. Who are the names who are you looking who do you see as your biggest competitors this weekend? Who are the ones on your watch list?
Biggest ones, I would say Matt Hansen, probably Trevor Foley, potentially. He's vulnerable on the swim though. His bike's strong, and I think for him, he wants it to be hot and horrible conditions because he's grown up in Florida. So, like, if it's really oppressive conditions, he's probably going to be well. A Polish guy, I can't think of his name.
Robert Willowit.
Yes,
the world record holder for an indoor Ironman. Did you know that?
Is he really?
He claimed that a couple of years ago after Jan did his indoor Ironman. Robert Willowit did an indoor Ironman. And I think this was when the record was 7:35, and I think he went faster. So he claimed that he had the Ironman world record at one point.
Really?
Yeah,
right.
He definitely did.
Yeah, well, I think he's actually pretty handy. Like, he was second in the European Championships last year. From what I've heard, I don't know too much about him, but I do know he's a very good swimmer and he's a very good runner. So anyone who can run well is generally a threat in an Ironman, because as long as they get off the bike in contention, they can win the race. So he's definitely one of them. Rudy von Berg, he's been coached by Mikkel, hasn't he? You know, and I think this is the first race we'll really see how his coaching with Mikkel has actually panned out, because I know he won Nice last year, but he was still coached by his old coach, Luc van Leerd. Then he swapped to him afterwards. And then he only really had 8 weeks of training before Kona. So it wasn't really, you can't really see too much of what someone's coaching's done in 8 weeks, because obviously you've got a recovery from one Ironman and then a taper for the next one. So it was probably only like 5 weeks of actual training. So it's not really going to be that much, you know, show you that much. Actually, probably 12 weeks is probably wouldn't. I don't think, but this race will be the first time we've seen what he's really done. So it'll be very interesting. He's done the whole winter of an Ironman block. Has he got faster? Has the training slowed him down? Like, you know, we'll find out. I feel that a lot of people, when they go to Ironman, one of the big mistakes they make is doing a lot of intervals at Ironman pace on the bike and on the run. And I think all it does is it slows you down. It adds excess fatigue because you're constantly training at an effort, which doesn't really get you any fitter. It just adds a lot of fatigue, and long term, I think it has very big detrimental effects on people. I think they burn out psychologically and physically. I think they get slower because they decrease their thresholds. And long term, you see people that do this after a year, 18 months of doing that type of training, they're off the radar. You know, it works sometimes at first, because if you've been doing a lot of threshold training and VO2 max training, doing that block of training like that, you can be all right. Long term, if you spend more than like a few months doing that type of training, 5-6 months, you're going to massively detrain. And I feel like there's a lot of people that train like that now. And to me, that's old school training. I remember when I first got into doing Ironman, 2012, and the general style of training back then was lots of Ironman pace stuff, hour intervals, you know, long intervals at Ironman pace, 3 hours at Ironman pace. Then it changed. It all went to doing a lot of threshold training, tempo, VO2 max, getting your threshold higher, getting fit so you can hold a high percentage of that. Then the Norwegians came along. They went back to what I class as the standard old school approach. Lots of this LT1, Ironman pace training stuff. And that's worked for them because people don't look at the big picture. Every time they've done an Ironman, it's come 6 to 8 weeks generally after a short distance race, which they've trained for. So they've done the VO2, they've done the threshold type training. Then they do a bit of an Ironman block training where they get these long endurance type efforts, these tempo efforts. And of course, that's transferred quite well because you've just done a big VO2 max block and threshold block. You've got your threshold high. You haven't detrained because you haven't gone long enough. And that's worked well for them. But the problem with a lot of these Ironman athletes now is they've looked at the type of training they're doing and they're doing it long term. They're doing it for 5-6 months at a time, a year at a time. And that doesn't work. That is just going to detrain you long term. But they don't look at the bigger picture. You know, the Norwegians are doing what they need to do for an Ironman because they're coming from short distance blocks. It would be different, I totally guarantee you, if they were training for Ironmans all the time, but they're not. And I think a lot of these people that are racing Texas are going to have done a whole winter of doing a lot of LT1 stuff. They're going to have detrained their thresholds and they're going to be weak as piss. And they're not going to have any way of like accelerating when you go past. They're going to have no top end. You go past them, put a surge in, 450 watts. They're going to be out the back door faster than a fart.
I love to see it. Now, one of the things I've determined to start doing when we talk to pros this year is ask the question that everybody has been asking recently, and that is, Joe Skipper, are you the PTO mystery pro?
Me? No, absolutely not. Like, I would love to know who it is. People have said, am I the mystery pro? I can guarantee you I'm not the mystery pro. I would love to know who the mystery pro is, but I've absolutely zero idea who it is. I heard it was Laura Siddall.
Really? Interesting.
That's what I heard.
I did see a comment saying who said it's a he, and I think it was actually Laura Siddall who said that. So maybe that's who. I thought it was Jan Frodeno, to be honest. The way that they were talking, like, because they're very reasonable approaches and I think well-measured comments and stuff. I was like, I again, maybe it's just because I'm a fanboy, but I thought, there's a bit of Jan Frodeno about this. I did like the Lionel reaction to the comments that he might be washed up. I thought that was quite funny the other day, but anyway, mate, good luck this weekend. Thanks for chatting. And I'm sure we'll see you on the podium.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah. And we're back. I'm sure that was a great chat with Joe. What do you think, James?
He's always got a lot to say, mate. He's an intriguing character, and I love his openness and his honesty. The only thing that probably let that down was the interviewer, but
always.
What can you do?
Always. Well, Jimbo, if people want to find out other things about MX, what do they need to do?
If you want to find out, I almost read the wrong thing there.
The other podcast you do.
Yeah. If you want to find out more about MX Endurance, head to mxendurance.com or search MX Endurance on Facebook or at MX Endurance on Twitter or Instagram. If you want to follow me, I'm at bale.james85 on Instagram, or you can follow Tim at T414 on Instagram. Jump onto iTunes, give the show a review. You can do it in the podcast app. It's really easy and incredibly helpful. If you like what we're doing, tell a friend, help us grow. If you've got any suggestions, guests, comments, or criticisms, then DM Tim Ford directly on any form of social media. He loves it.
So a little peek behind the curtain. A few weeks ago, I put up the episode and I'd gotten the files mixed up with the raw audio. So I had uploaded the audio, edited it, and then you messaged me like, dude, I think you've made a mistake. It's the old episode. I was like, oh, okay, no worries, I'll fix it. Get the audio again, did it, the whole thing. And you're like, it's still the odd episode. And I'd done the same thing. I'd used the same audio twice, But speaking of the message, the only reason I mentioned is because I'm not the boss of MX anymore. I don't do MX anymore. I just do the podcast. But I was in the MX Instagram account today, and somebody has sent through a message being like, Hey guys, I think you might have made a slight error with the audio because I think it's last week's episode. There's no mention of da 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 da, and then a series of like 10 missed audio calls. So you can tell this person's like panic, going, "No, where's the part?" I genuinely appreciate you reaching out to us, listener, but I just found it so funny. You could almost like sense the panic, the increased panic, because they're like, "Fucking, this isn't the podcast. Where's the podcast?" But yeah, I did make a little bit of an error last week, so I'm dropping the ball lately, mate. But hopefully we'll be better moving forward.
What a day, mate. What a day. That was a good episode. Enjoyed that. I'm interested by this. As I go through my triathlon watching journey, I'm less and less interested in the sort of the individual races, and I'm so interested in the PTO element of it and how it's going to go and the broadcast side of things, because I want the sport to just.
Same. All right, mate. Talk to you next week.
Cheerio.